How's everybody doing? So, before we kick off into my talk and my janky graphics, is this on? Can you hear me? Great. I'm going to kind of lay out where we're going this evening. So we have a very interesting kind of eclectic mix for you, and that very much represents the world of Node. We're in the enterprise, in embedded devices, in mobile, all over the place. So I'm going to share some of my experience, some of what I've been helping grow in the Node community. And then after me, we'll have Trevor Norris, Node core contributor, and we're going to go really deep into some core stuff that is sort of very low level. And then we're going to come up from there, and Eric Toth of PayPal is going to share some of the experience of the transformation that's taken place at PayPal, and really the pervasive Node that is driving PayPal now. So it's really exciting. And we're going to close out with Guillermo Rauch, the creator of Socket.io, and WebSockets, and sort of connecting it back to Kazing. This meetup is really special to me because it connects back to the very earliest parts of my career that were with WebSockets. I unfortunately made the choice to go not with Java, but over to this Node thing. It was WebSockets and Socket.io that really kickstarted that part of my career. So we're going to bring it home with Guillermo and WebSockets. And Socket.io. Socket.io, got to 1.0 before Node got to 1.0. So it's really exciting and an integral part of Node's growth. So, that's the evening. Let me dive into Node.js and what's going on. So, I'm Dee Shaw. I am the co-founder of a company called NodeSource. We do Node for the enterprise. We help large companies run Node effectively. Before that, I co-founded a consortium, a group of individuals that came together early on in Node's history to provide professional services for Node, the Node firm. And I've worked at a bunch of startups with Node at Storify, Spreecast, Voxer, Class Dojo. If you enjoy hearing me and ah and all that stuff, you can listen in your eardrums to me on my podcast called NodeUp. I run a couple events around bots and Arduino stuff. NodeBots SF. Nebrius is here. I don't know if Miles is also here. Great group of people where we come together, and it's really kind of the antithesis of this event. This event is special person dropping knowledge on other people. The NodeBots, I compare it to getting together and basically building Legos with friends. Closest as I can get to that. It's just hacking, sharing, and hanging out. So NodeBots Day and NodeBots SF. It's a very special, kind of very different meetup that I created. So let's dive in and see why Node has been so important, and why Node is relevant, and why Node will continue to be relevant for, let's say, 10 years. I'm not going to say that Node is going to be relevant for forever, but there's a incredibly positive story for Node in the next 10 years. And the foundation, the anchor of that is because Node is a platform for running JavaScript on the server. It has increasingly been a part of how we build applications. We with the dawn of HTML5, we really now have the tools to build what we want with JavaScript on the web. and that is driving ever more greater importance of JavaScript and the need for dynamic and effective backends. On top of that, we're building services that need to be responsive. And I'm stealing the responsive word from responsive design to illustrate a pattern that we've seen in the back end, where perhaps you have a API endpoint that returns a lot of data, awesome for your web app, really horrible for your mobile application. Mobile application, you need something that's tailored for that. It's been an area where Node has really excelled. You can craft and deliver content that is precisely targeted to the needs of the device. And Node is an incredible lightweight engine to drive that. The Internet of Things has been another factor increasing the relevance of Node. The democratization of programming, really, with JavaScript, and it has been augmented by the democratization of hardware with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. So connecting that to our services and our infrastructure has been really compelling. And beyond that, there's new opportunities inside devices, inside of switches, inside of the devices that are powering the internet, that is ever more increasingly important. So we have this beautiful language, beautiful with warts, language, JavaScript. But the fantastic thing about JavaScript, that it's incredibly approachable and everywhere, and it powers all of these platforms. When I went through the transition from being a JavaScript developer, middle-tier developer, doing the back-end services in Java and the front-end services in JavaScript, I was blown away once I moved to JavaScript on the server side, how fast I was moving. It was absolutely incredible. So this rapid cycle time, and what I like to call the time from ideation to realization, really becomes much smaller when you're working with a dynamic language, if you want to get language geeky. But JavaScript is a fantastic expression of that. And then if you're looking at JavaScript and its relevance, this is being reinforced and becoming a competency that business leaders are looking for and hiring around. And the fact that now we have front end pervasive, tooling pervasive, back end pervasive, it's growing and snowballing into a really relevant career path. So as we explore Node, let's go and look at what it took to get here, because it was not all roses for the entire history. Back in 2009, we had the original presentation of Ryan Dahl's hacks. 2010, when I started adopting Node, and then left my job and then basically came out to San Francisco and abandoned everything to come work on Node. I'm not allowed to curse. Things were really broken. The ecosystem was really fragmented. We didn't have a package manager. We had Kiwi, which was kind of janky from TJ Holloway-Chook, and Isaac came along with NPM. Thankfully, we kind of came together and decided to have one mechanism for delivering packages. Your promise lovers, we got rid of promises then. So we we explored a lot of patterns, broke a lot of things, and really brought together a fantastic platform. Fast forward a year, and 2011, with the .6 release, we introduced Windows. And we don't have laptops out, but there's a sea of silver in here, I'm sure, if you pull your laptops out. And the systems that are not Macs are probably Linux machines. But if you go outside of the West Coast, you go outside the Bay Area, Windows still dominates the world. And if it weren't for Microsoft's investment in Node, I honestly don't think that the platform would be where it is today. So I am really grateful for that evolution in Node. Even though I spend very little time in the Windows ecosystem for Node and its success. If we didn't have that cross-platform ability, and if you look at other platforms that have chosen to sort of eschew and ignore Windows, they haven't evolved as much. So this is a pivotal point in Node's growth. 2012, it was all about the real time. Socket.io is booming. Everyone's working with Node, building great things. In 2012, spent a lot of time with Steven out of Publo. Not Node, but great architecture. Fantastic. Real time has been pivotal to Node's growth. The low latency I/O is just a fantastic fit for that. Then in 2013, we introduced the enterprise. Walmart comes along, and they have their Black Friday event running all their mobile, I think it's a large portion of their mobile traffic on, through Node, and having it be a rock solid Black Friday. That really encouraged many others to come along behind it. And so you had Walmart and PayPal really paving the road for large-scale Node. And 2014 is it's really become pervasive, and one of the default choices where new development, new platforms are growing, and the productivity that is being done in Node is letting these organizations choose that, and all of the foundation of why we're building JavaScript applications has driven the growth of Node. So, as we're looking at building applications, let's see what has led to Node's success in these environments. If you look at large systems that have evolved over the years, and you look at, I'm going to pick on Java a little bit. You look at Java apps, it is typically one big monolithic application. And I know dyed-in-the-wool Java developers will say that you can go POJOs, you can go simple minimalist Java services. Awesome. Engineering good practices are in a way universal, and you can apply them in most every language. But typically what you see in Java applications, Ruby applications, PHP applications are large monolithic applications, and this tends to slow everybody down. And over time, having all that code having to go through this bottleneck, these applications were incredibly behind schedule, and in fact, 6 months to 2 years behind schedule with some of these other platforms. The reality is that shipping code wins, and the time to execution, the time to realizing that that engineering effort is greatly reduced in building out an application that I'll step away from Node, latch on to the principles of engineering. So a smaller thing, you can iterate on it faster, period, right? Node tends to encourage that. So one of the biggest impact in the last year or so areas of Node's growth has been the front end, back end. It's a really odd slice of the application architecture, but these rich client teams that have been building out these fantastic dynamic JavaScript experiences needed something more. The monoliths that were driving the delivery of these applications were just too slow. You need, as a front-end engineer, to rapidly iterate on the customer experience to respond to their needs. So the introduction of a front-end, back-end, it's a back-end for your front-end services. So templating and CSS and all that stuff is moved out of the monolith, the big application, into this lightweight, dynamic node layer. It's not incredibly sexy code there. It's very utilitarian, but it's extraordinarily functional, and absolutely allows these user interface engineers, these front end teams, to operate in a whole new way. From my experience as a developer that did back end services and front end, the ability to also think in JavaScript is insanely liberating. So let's look at the impact of the front end, back end. These engineers that are crafting the user experience are the front line of what everyone experiences. So it's extremely important that area of the code base be dynamic. Your back-end services that talk to a database through data schema probably doesn't evolve weekly, but your front end may evolve moment to moment. There's a baseball game. There's an earthquake in Napa. You need to address that what's changing and deliver an experience that is appropriate. So Node is empowering these front end teams by allowing us to really put in front of them the tools that they need to deliver the experience that they want to. So we're able to pull away from some of these weird architectures that are delivering HTML, HTML5, whatever, HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript. If you've gone to Java land or C++ land and had a C++ or Java abstraction for CSS that you have to it's a nightmare scenario. You can't take your expertise in all of these technologies and apply it to it's so incredibly separate there. So we go in and reduce that crazy abstraction, get rid of that, allow front-end engineers to operate within their specialization and be able to focus on what they're doing. They don't have to go through a middleman, essentially, to produce the experience. You can rely on the knowledge and your expertise that you've built up over your career. So the biggest thing for me in going through my transition from having to do back-end services in Node and something other than Node, and delivering a front-end experience is not having to context switch. I would go build UI components and then on a separate day have to go and sort of go into Java mode, database, ORM in Java, Hibernate, all that stuff. It was really, really mentally challenging to go back and forth. Enjoyed programming in both, but not having that context switch. A lot of times we're crafting API elements that we're delivering new experiences to user. You can rapidly iterate on the back end, rapidly iterate on the front end, and really pull together a fantastic experience. Without that cognitive load that's involved in going back and forth between platforms. So, what are the ways that we can really embrace Node, incorporate Node into our ecosystem? How do we accomplish this front end, back end? One of the biggest things that I've seen in the success of front end, back end is the use of an API, having an effective abstraction layer for your data. I've thrown out the concept that databases must die. I got a lot of backlash for that. But essentially, what I mean there is that you should be talking to an API. You should not be exposing, and this is, again, this is not Node specific, this is engineering in general. You should be exposing to other tiers in your architecture an API, and then if it's your responsibility in the various tiers of things to talk to a database, that's fine. There you have database connections. But if you're doing template rendering and rendering JavaScript files and CSS rendering, you should probably focus on just that. Separate out those concerns, focus on that, create a lightweight API layer that talks to your data services, aggregates them, and really focus the areas. You'll design better, smaller, more effective applications that way. So that ends up basically looking like proxies all the way down. These smaller apps, it can feel a little bit weird, but there are once you break things out into these API layers that are talking, you're essentially handing off the data through these various tiers. So if you're looking at an application that's going through all these hops, that is a very effective pattern in Node. And if you need to take a data point away for oh my God, latency bad, network bad, in an internal network with Node, you're looking at about 6 milliseconds of added latency going through Node. So Node is very, very efficient at doing streaming I/O. That allows you to have very fluent interfaces for communicating with your data. To do this, we're using a dynamic language, rolling this out into any scale. Do yourself a favor. Don't set aside testing. Test early, test often. And to make that effective, automate it. Automate your testing. Have that baked into your ecosystem. Automate the process of shipping code. I've always been a fan of continuous integration and continuous delivery, not so much for the fanciness of we're shipping code every XYZ times a day. The reason why I love continuous integration, continuous delivery is it forces you to do this. If your code is going out all the time and you don't have effective tests in place, someone's going to be unhappy. And so, they're great patterns that allow you to work effectively. So Node is really growing and becoming an essential part of how we build things. from servers to build tools throughout our ecosystem because of JavaScript. And I'm grateful for the ability to write JavaScript everywhere. It's fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to bring up Trevor Norris, and I guess as Trevor's getting set up, we'll have a larger Q&A panel later today. But if you want to ask any questions, happy to take one. As Trevor recompiles his kernel, Linux user. Yes. Right. Sorry, I need to repeat the question. So the question is, there's 10 years out. What is out there? I think that would be driven by what web technology is exposed to us. The web is, the driver for JavaScript, and one of the reasons why JavaScript got to this level. If we begin to see pluralities in the web, I'm at Google, so Dart. I don't think it's going to be Dart, but if the browsers can introduce a language that that begins to become as pervasive as JavaScript, I would look to that. We actually on NodeUp we have a show scheduled for next week on Node versus Go. Again, I don't think Go is a fantastic language. It really does a beautiful job at being a better C. But it was designed to be a systems language. Node was designed to be an applications language. Node's extremely effective at being an application language. I'm okay doing systemsy things. At NodeSource, we actually end up recommending that a lot of companies do not use Node for all their things. They're systems tools that are really good and really effective at doing what they do. And build your applications. Use JavaScript and that velocity to build your applications. But it is not a universal panacea. It's a fantastic tool. But in every large installation of code that I've seen, there's an incredible plurality of languages that continue to exist. And even though JavaScript is taken over a lot of the new growth in many of these instances, the presence of Java and presence of C++ at your larger code bases are still there. So what comes in after JavaScript, in my mind, whatever the web drives in, and very possibly could still be JavaScript. Yes. Sorry, sure.
You mentioned about contracts and APIs. Considering RESTful API, what would you say about some documentation and that? Is it like RAML or API blueprint?
So the specifics of what are the effective tools for REST APIs with JavaScript, right? So the contract patterns there. I think actually Eric Toth can probably speak better to this. I tend to be a little bit lower level than that, but I believe they have been exploring RUM. The API contracts, what are the effective patterns? That is an area that that the Java world has really excelled at, and that the JavaScript world has done less of a good job at at addressing and tackling as a fundamental part of what's going on. So schemas and what is the, I know you guys are using for your REST APIs? Swagger. Swagger seems to be increasingly popular. I do think there's I always get a nice cringe when I mention waddles. WSDL waddles. WSDL was really influential in introducing us to service-oriented architectures. Waddle, is XML to describe JSON, and that sucked. So it's not a great pattern, and if you ask any JavaScript developer about XML, they'll kind of back away. But I do think there's a lot of room for improvement there, and if you look at API definition discovery and a lot of the things that came out of the SOAP era, the patterns for that have not really concretized in JavaScript, even though the use of it is probably even greater. So we'll be back. We'll have a panel and probably some discussion. Hand it over to Trevor Norris. I'm going to steal my water.
Thank you.
Thank you.